What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 42 of Into the Necrosphere. My guest today is Dan Thornton, the guitarist for a band that everybody who listens to the show should be very familiar with. And if you're not, then stop whatever you are doing and go and check out their record of Void and Solitude right now. The band in question, of course, is Crimson Throne. Dan is somebody that I've wanted to talk to for a while. I've wanted to talk to somebody from Crimson Throne pretty much since the show started. So this was a fun one. We spoke about the band. We spoke about weightlifting, black metal, recording during coronavirus, and all sorts of other stuff. So fun conversation, which is going to be coming your way very shortly. But before that happens, it is time for my demo of the week. And we are keeping it right here in the UK. The band is Suffering. They are a black metal band based out of the West Midlands. They, technically speaking, this is actually not a demo. It's a full-length record that I'm going to be playing a track off of that came out in 2018. But they are an independent band. They reached out to me when I put out the Necro signal for asking for bands to send me their demo. And I liked what I heard, so I thought I would share it with you. The full length is called 11, and the track that I'm going to be playing is called Conjuration Through Black Horns. Conjuration Through Black Horns by a band called Suffering. The album that it was taken off of is called 11. Not technically a demo, but the band are independent, so if we want to talk technicality, I think they slip through by the skin of their satanic teeth. And a reminder that if you are in a band and you want me to hear what you're doing, if you just recorded a demo, if you're unsigned, if you want me to check out your stuff, reach out to me on email. intothenecrosphere@gmail.com is the address. Or you can also follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. On Twitter, the handle is @iNecrosphere. On Instagram and Facebook, it's just @IntoTheNecrosphere. And you can drop me a direct message and send me a link to where I can download your stuff. And if I like what I hear, I'll feature it on the show. If I really like what I hear, I might even invite you to be a guest, as I have done with John Wilcox of the Mighty Masters Hammer. And I actually did the same thing for Sonny King of Primal Holocaust way back at the start of the year. So, the idea is to help promote as much of the underground as I possibly can, which carries with it the sundry benefit that if any of these bands ever, go big, then I can turn around and say, you heard it here first, back before they sold out and turned into pussies. Like I said, the guest today is Dan Thornton of Crimson Throne. I'm also going to be reviewing the new Ante-Inferno record. I say new, latest release. About a week or so ago, I posted a message on social media asking people for their favorite records of the first half of 2020, because I've just recorded an episode of the show with Rick Eaglestone of This Is Metal, or This Is Black Metal, I should say, where we discussed that. And Ante-Inferno came up on quite a few people's lists. So I figured that it was time that I gave them a proper listen. I had paid some attention to them when the record first came out, or actually when they first put out the first single off the album. I had not done so after that, however, so I felt it was time for me to give them a fair shake. So you'll get to hear what I thought about that after my interview with Dan. I'm also going to be reviewing another band out of Finland that was a discovery off of Black Metal Promotions called Väki. So that one is absolutely spectacular. So you'll hear what I'm talking about in about an hour's time. And then, of course, if you stick around to the very end of the show, you get to hear me talk about the latest metal news, putting my own inimitably cranky spin on it. And that pretty much brings me to the end of the intro. Like I said, I've just recorded an episode with Rick Eaglestone of This Is Black Metal. We are going to be talking about the first half of 2020. I actually recorded that interview on the same day that I'm recording the intros and outros to this episode. I had such a great time talking to Rick, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy that episode. That will be coming your way next week. And then there's a few other things that I've got in the pipeline that will be coming your way soon. But in the meantime, please welcome for the very first time to Enter the Necrosphere, most definitely not the last, Dan Thornton of Crimson Throne. Well, Dan, welcome to Into the Necrosphere. I think this is another conversation that's probably been on my wish list more or less since I started the podcast. In part because I was such a huge fan of Void and Solitude, and I've kept a close eye on the work you guys have done since the EP that you just brought out. I thought was fantastic. I have a confession to make about that EP, but we'll get to that later. Mm-hmm. I think we need to know each other better before I make that confession. Yeah. But how are you doing, dude? How's everything been going with you in the over the last couple of months in this strange new world we find ourselves?
Yeah, good, man. I mean, I work in an industry that's, I'm not going to say benefited from it, but has definitely made the most of Corona. I work in print, so we've been doing a lot of social distance signaging, and we've recently jumped into the market of desk screens and safety screens and all that kind of thing. So they've been moving quick. So that's kept me nice and busy. But Yeah, no, carried on straight through. Basically, it's not really a great deal different other than just touring being cancelled and just general, any sort of social element that I would have done anyway, just non-existent. But.
Yeah, you're a lifter as well, are you not? And I'm not just saying that because on the screen I can see that I can see the yokes, but I know I saw on Facebook a little while ago you pulled a 245, which was a kick up my ass because and when I said 245 for anybody that obviously hasn't seen that, a 245 deadlift, it gave me a kick up my ass because I think you weigh significantly less than me, and my PB is 5 kilos above that, so I'm probably lagging by the looks of things.
I reckon once I get back in, now I'll probably be able to pull about 150.
Yeah,
it's just been a long time away, and so I made the sort of move into more powerlifting kind of stuff. Maybe about November, I think, and just got hooked on numbers, and so it was just kept pushing for numbers, and So on that the last day, because I did actually manage to hit 250 a couple of weeks after. Yeah. Wasn't the cleanest 250, but I'm going to count to 250, and then on that last day, I'm just going to load up to 260 and see what happens. And got about halfway up, it's like it's not happening. So I have to wait however long to try and get back in there now. But
that's the thing with those fucking
a slow return, I think.
Yeah, 100%, and that's the thing with those fucking increments as well. Like I've had it with squats and I've had it with deadlifts. You know you're going to have a good set, and you rapidly start going up. You start maybe with like squats. You start warming up with, or I start warming up with 100, and you sail through that, and then it's 120, 140, and then eventually you kind of hit that peak, and then you can put on a fucking packet of biscuits on each side of the bar, and it's literally like they hung two fucking battle cruisers on either side. There's just no lifting. I remember when I did a 250, I added 5 kilos on, 2.5 kilos either side. I came up, and it was literally like the thing was glued to the ground. It was like, this thing is not going anywhere.
There's a couple of Olympic weightlifters that are sort of at the same time as I usually am, and they've got like 1 kilo plates, and they like swear like when in that kind of world where literally it's down to the gram, and you're literally putting on like 1 kilo either side, and it's still I don't know whether it's just the mindset of it, but it just makes it so much harder. You could have 10 plates on, but adding that one kilo is just the worst.
Do you share steroids with them, or do you have your own?
No, thankfully, I've not gone into that world. It's a bit
into the steroid game.
It's a bit too intense for me.
Oh, big time, dude. I remember there was a guy that he'll remain nameless, but when I was doing Thai boxing, he was my strength and conditioning coach, my self-appointed strength and conditioning coach. But the one day he was like, okay, so when's your fight? I'm like, it's in 8 weeks' time from now. Okay, so, we got this and this and this training, and, let's talk supplements. And he started listing all this shit. And he's like, this won't show up on a urine test, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually it turned out this guy was like injecting himself with insulin that insulin they use for diabetics, like actual like medical doses specifically for just so that he could absorb protein quicker.
Yeah. Oh, it's
out of your fucking mind, dude. Because my dad injects himself with insulin as well because he's diabetic. But it's like, there was a period of time where bodybuilders were buying breast milk off of eBay because it's got human growth hormone.
Yeah, I mean, like I looked into because I just got fascinated with the whole science of it, like how just obviously how your food impacts it, how water impacts it, how sleep impacts it, and just sort of started looking down the whole drug route. And it's you're injecting growth hormone, injecting insulin. It's got to be timed right with the sort of foods you eat, and they're injecting it around the training window. And if it's not around that, you could pass out training. It's like it's every day is like down to the second on that, and you've got to be so consistent with it. If you're not, you can really do some damage.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I have to say, I mean, I've been weight training I've probably been seriously weight training for the better part of a decade. And I'm not, I'm not in the league of a Mark Bell or a Stan Efferding or fucking, any of those dudes. Phil, I'm no Phil Heath, but I've used a lot of different supplements over the years, and the change that I made to my diet and my lifestyle that made by a country mile the biggest difference was I started supplementing with vitamin D. Mm-hmm. And I ditched almost, like, just as far as regular eating was concerned, I ditched almost all of the chicken that I was eating, all of the white meat that I was eating, and I switched it all with red meat.
Yeah.
And as soon as I upped my steak intake, my numbers went like this.
Yeah.
Massive difference.
I can imagine. I think that the biggest one for me was tracking water and tracking sleep.
Yeah.
It was two things that, like, you just think that's not going to make much difference, but I think, like, I get through something crazy at work, like about 6 to 8 litres, and then sleep, it's got to be like minimum 7 to 9. And like, once you start tracking it, you sort of notice the difference right away on all fronts, not just for training, just having more energy throughout the day, I found. But
yeah, no, I agree. And the thing is, you're like, I found with the vitamin D and and actually the red meat to a degree as well, your mood is just way better. Like, I don't know if it's just a guy thing, but you're like, my mood is just a lot more even throughout the day. You know, you don't have that moment in the afternoon where you're really fatigued and tired.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do say sometimes on the show, anyone who wants to add me on Instagram, they're more than welcome to. But if you're a vegan, you're going to have a rough time with it. It's like,
all the cookout photos.
Oh yes, mate. I even thought of doing a couple of episodes. One day when this lockdown lifts, I might record a few episodes over a cookout. We can have the grill going, and we'll just stand around and talking shit. So if you're up for that, mate, you could. But have you been able to do any training during lockdown?
I tried a bit, but I think it was same as a lot of people that I've spoken to about home training, where you just kind of lose the motivation not being around it. Like, I just find being around the whole gym environment to be the most sort of. I didn't realise how much of a fundamental part. It sounds stupid. Of course, a gym is a fundamental part of training, but as far as psychologically what it does to sort of be around all those people, whereas maybe the few cables and weights that I can find in iron bars or whatever just laying around, it's not. It gets the job done, but it just doesn't feel right. So there wasn't much longevity to it. Let's say that. Yeah.
No, I was on and off with it. The best that I could do, because for some reason when the lockdown began, every fucking man, woman, child, dog, and every living thing in this country decided they were going to start a home gym at their house. Yeah. And they bought up pretty much everything. So eventually I borrowed some stuff from my friend, but I mean the most that I can stack onto one bar is, and it's not even a bar, it's just dumbbells, is about probably 16 kilos.
Yeah.
So what I've taken to doing, because the other thing that happened in tandem with this is, whilst the weights went down, the weight on the scale went up.
Yes, so, I found that as well.
Yeah, so I started just switching to doing instead of doing reps, just working for time. So like you do lateral side raise, for example, for 45 seconds on end. It's pretty brutal. I still believe in low reps and high weight. I prefer that, and especially for stuff like your back and things like that. Like I'm starting to feel now, after probably 4 or 5 months of not going to the gym, my back is starting to hurt again when I wake up in the morning. And like at first I was like, am I just getting? Is it true? Am I actually getting older? And then I thought, no, fuck that. It's nature that's wrong. Yeah, no, big time. But dude, so you have a number of musical concerns aside from of Crimson Throne, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I wanted to kind of backtrack a little bit to how the band got started, because you guys have all been doing a bunch of stuff in music, and you sort of found each other, and then just especially if you listen to Avoid and Solitude, there seems to have been this creative click between the four of you, and you just made magic. So how did this? How did you guys meet, and how did this? I guess, how did you sort of ascertain that there was this chemistry and there was this kind of this alchemy between you guys?
It was. I mean, the band was started before I was involved. It was with Tom and the original songwriter Pat, who moved abroad for work. They sort of they put out the original demo, and I don't think they got to the point. No, they didn't get to the point where they did any shows. And then Pat left for work, and then I was brought in by our old drummer, who I'd known since school, because he just knew I was a guitarist that could kind of deal with the material. It's not the most kind of complex stuff, but just to get his first few shows through. And with the rig that I had, it meant we could do the atmospheric stuff live along with Ange. And so we did the first few shows with that kind of setup, and then our old drummer left, and we got Dave in, and it was, well, I think that by this point the record was mostly written between me and Ange, because I'd started writing at that point to kind of take up the last of what wasn't written. I think Dave had about 4 weeks to learn the album, whilst we were sort of finishing it. And then, yeah, we just went in to record it with Dave. I engineered the guitars, bass and vocals at Tom's house. We were just recorded in Tom's. Made a little sort of isolation booth for a guitar cab, and that, a very sort of haphazard one with pillows and duvets and whatnot. And then, sent that off to Misha at Holy Mountain, where we did the drums. It came back sounding much sort of better than we thought. But I think because it was thrown together on a bit of a sort of whim, it was sort of, right, let's just get this thing done because we had time limits on it and all that kind of thing, that we would really, really shuffle it. It was like, I had no idea that it was going to come out sounding kind of that. I don't know if it was quite polished. I mean, we listen back to it now, and it's kind of a world away from where we want to be now. Because we would have liked to have been more collaborative on it, and we would have liked to have really had more time with it. But it was just a bit of a freak show thing, but it all kind of came together really. But it created a product that we were all chuffed with, and then has taken us, a decent wedge so far. It's done really quite well. So we're happy with where it's got us. But yeah, it was a rushed journey, I'd say, to the first album, and then sort of now we're just looking to take more time, find out what we kind of really want to sound like, and kind of just refine our process a bit more on it. Yeah.
It's so weird to hear you say that, because it's black metal isn't exactly known for its its high fidelity, and actually it sort of doesn't always benefit from that. But whenever I listen to that record, I try and listen to it on the bigger speakers here at home, and it's an incredibly well recorded record, and it sounds really, really good. It sounds so crazy. Like when you describe how the album was put together, it sounds like a fucking old punk rock album.
I mean,
sort of DIY vibe to it.
It's kind of what it felt like to some degree. I mean,
that's what I was saying. It sounds like, if you were going to tell somebody, check out a audiophile quality black metal album, I would probably say, Crimson Throne would be one, Ruins of Everest, Exuvia would be another.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. There's a real crispness to the way that it sounds.
I think a massive shout out to Misha Herring for that. It's I mean obviously the drums are all done in his fully sound treated room on Dave's kit, which sounds immense anyway. If I'm right in thinking, I could be wrong, I think that's the one that he bought off Adrian Erlandson or Daniel Erlandson. Mm-hmm. He's got. So it's a ridiculous kit, and even Misha was saying it's one of the best kits he's ever recorded. And with just Dave being the phenom that he is, made it sound ridiculously good. The guitars, I knew a rudimentary amount about recording, but we had very sort of same minimal equipment. We had a decent cab. We used my Mesa cab, but the completely wrong mic was the kind of only one I had. So we're like, right, we'll just see how that works. Tweaked it a bit, and it was just me on my laptop. I recorded my bits, Andrew recorded his bits, and Tom did the bass, and then we did the vocals. Was it over a couple? I think it was all done in a couple of days. I can't remember how long it took. I think it was 2. And just sent it off, and I just kept my fingers crossed. Basically, I hope that's good enough. But it listening back, because I could listen back on my monitors that I took around there, but it wasn't in a properly treated room. They weren't in a great position. So it was just kind of winging it and putting a hell of a lot of trust in Misha, which thankfully he came through on. And yeah, like I said, we couldn't really believe how good it sounded when it came back. So yeah, chuffed with it.
You say vocals though, but is it not true that with black metal, when you record vocals, you actually only hold the microphone to one of the monitors where the instrumental track is playing, and then Satan does the speaks through that?
Yeah. So, we did it through a PS4 headset from the other side of the door. Yeah.
As I said, it's mind blowing when you talk about it that way, and it's weird. It reminds me a little bit of Abduction as well. I spoke to AV way back, and he was saying that he'd been recording the vocals like every night after work, like he'll come in and do a quick song.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those that's sort of crazy productive and will just get it done by any means. Yeah. And I think it, like you're saying, it's kind of the spirit of the sound as well. If you sort of try and make it too polished and you put too much consideration, you miss a lot of those happy accidents.
Yes.
End up making what could be a really good album in a way that you didn't really intend on it. So it's like I said, I would have much rather we just gone in and done the whole thing in a pro studio. But there was something about doing it the way we did that gave it its magic. So I wouldn't really change
There's also a thing with black metal. I find that the longer a band takes to record a black metal record, the greater the risk of the album sounding self-conscious. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think especially when it comes to black metal, I think that's a style of music that suffers massively when any of that creeps in.
Yeah.
Because like if you think of some of the greatest black metal albums ever written, Hate Them by Darkthrone. I mean that took 18 hours to do.
Yeah.
Battles in the North, I think that I'm speaking under correction here, but from my understanding, there was 2 live takes and they chose the best one each time.
Yeah.
I mean, Philosopheme, God only knows that took him 3 minutes.
That took him as long as the album to listen to than it did to record. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. That fucking 20-minute instrumental, right? Just loop that and then I'm out of here.
Do send it. Yeah.
But there's like a beauty to that spontaneity. That not only you, as you kind of said, it creates those happy accidents, but it sort of adds a sense of menace as well.
Yeah, without doubt. Yeah.
And I mean, the worst thing that you can have in black metal is no menace. And then you've got metal filth.
And then it sort of loses that kind of character.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How deeply involved were you in the writing process this time around? Because you mentioned that you would have liked to have contributed more.
Well, I think as far as like our individual contributions, the way it kind of works is me and Ange the way it's been working lately, and the way it kind of started on the Avoiding Solitude was me and Ange was bringing in individual tracks, and then what we actually had the discussion the other night about sort of material moving forward, and then we sort of collaborate on that more as far as where everyone's at. We've got widely different influences, so to try and kind of draw on more of those. But I think it was 5 tracks I ended up doing because it was on weird time. We were kind of rushed in. It just needed another set of ears. So I think we ended up kind of splitting the album half and half, but it wasn't as collaborative. So that's why like my biggest bugbear with the album is listening back to it. I know I can definitely hear it. And from some of that's like some people I've spoken to, you can kind of hear the disconnect between certain songs, the sort of which one sounds a little bit different to this one. And that's, because it's been written by 2 different people without necessarily convening in on each other's ideas, which is something that we're conscious of this time round, that because me and Ange do have 2 varying styles that both work really well within their own thing. I think there is, like, as far as varying an album, there's something to be said with having those 2 varying styles. But then there's just finding a line between that variation and consistency. So I think I know for sure I'd have liked a bit more collaborative, but I think it ended up being about level pegging with how much we kind of put in.
Yeah. That collaboration, has that been more present on the EP that you put out since, which is obviously the more of the sort of ambient stuff?
The most recent one, Isolate, Decimate, or Resilience of Life.
Isolate, Decimate is what I'm.
That
in particular.
Truth be told, was all done in my room.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I would, over the last sort of year or so, I've been sort of building up a sort of rig of synths and all that kind of thing, and I have loved the ambient kind of world for years. And it was kind of a way to keep busy during lockdown. You know, the whole ambient thing was something we wanted to experiment with, and we don't really want to just tie ourselves to just doing the black metal thing. I think we wanted to, you know, the ambience is prevalent in everything we do. We wanted to really hone in on that. And yeah, so I just had a few kind of ideas and patches and piano lines and all that kind of thing floating about. And me and Tom just kind of worked on it really slowly over the initial stages of lockdown. And yeah, just kind of put that out. It didn't really, you know, cost much to do. And we felt we had something to say with it. So yeah, I know that for the album, like I said, we sort of had started the ball rolling on writing for the next one. Because obviously with all this, we've got time in abundance. Yeah. So we want to really focus on bringing each of our best ones to the table and then making it sound more like us as a writing unit now, rather than in individual people. But no, for the more recent ambient one, that was basically me and Tom.
So here's a question, and this ties into what I said to you earlier, because I was listening to Isolate, Decimate this week in the run up to you and I talking. SOF, the first track on that record, around about the 5-minute mark, there's a piano line that starts. Yeah, I'm sure you'll be familiar with it. Who wrote that?
Me,
mate. You shit you not when I say this. I've not said this to anyone on the show in 40 odd episodes. Got as much as, you know, I'm a man's man. I got a lump in my throat when I heard that.
Thank you, man.
I mean, I thought it was just stunning. And it's interesting that you mentioned you felt like you had something to say. When I heard that, especially for some reason when I re-listened to that EP this week, I kind of thought to myself, with everything that's going on in the world right now, this is just somehow just the most fitting soundtrack that I could possibly think of. It sounds incredibly cinematic, and I want to touch on that in a second too. But you know, I'm probably being a bit clunky now. I'm phrasing this, but in terms of what you wanted to say, was the music that you put on there, was that an expression of how you see things or how you're experiencing things at the moment, or where did that come from?
I think for me it was because it's sort of the whole ambient thing for me has always been a very kind of solo endeavor, and it's something that I've not really pushed into any of my projects particularly, but it's something that's just because like everything musically that I do is obviously very heavily involving other people. I didn't really have much that's kind of just for me, and so I just come home from work and start patching ideas and recording lines and all that kind of thing. And I think probably subconsciously it was, because obviously everything especially in a musician's world now seems pretty bleak. And I think that was the general. I mean, that's always been the general vibe of Crimson Throne generally, but I think with this, it was just a much more reminiscent of the time, because that was what we could do with the facilities that we had. And yeah, it just felt very reminiscent of where the world is at, I think. Yeah. And then Tom put his kind of lyrical spin on it, which I'm not entirely sure where he ended up, but I think it was around about the same kind of thing. But yeah, I think subconsciously it probably is, because that's probably the one thing that's changed for me the most during the whole lockdown, is I've still needed that immediate release of creativity that I couldn't have really had anywhere else. Like I've had album recordings postponed and all that kind of thing. So this was like, right, I want something I can do now that is like still relevant.
Yeah. It's like somebody was saying to me a little while ago, the one thing that 2020 is going to lead to is a whole lot of one-man black metal projects.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
We were talking about AV. I saw he posted some picture of a black candle on Facebook yesterday, and he said new material is nearly done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just the world's just filled up with people at home with not much to do. So
yeah,
grab a random headset and start playing a fuzzy guitar into it, and bang, you got some project. But unless you are a AV and you actually do it really, really well, then
big time. But you know what movie that ambient record reminded me of, and particularly SOF is The Road.
Oh right, yeah.
I was actually, again, when I was sitting re-listening to it, I have recently rewatched The Road as well, and I was thinking to myself, they should actually, if you could recut this movie with this soundtrack, it would be so much better. How much there is a very kind of cinematic component to Crimson Throne's music. You know, if you think of like the intro, for example, to Avoid and Solitude, it's this like really like massively. It kind of builds up like a fucking army about to rush the gates of a castle, and not in like a cheesy way either. You know, it's not like Abigor in 1993 kind of bullshit. But how much does other art, cinema, things like that, how much does that affect your writing personally, especially for Crimson Throne?
Again, it's probably one of those things. It's not really particularly directly. I'm actually saying that. Recently, it has. Like, there's been a couple of new demos that I've sort of given the working title of the film that I was watching at the time. And so, funny you should say it. There was one, that I'd sent off the other week that was basically just had that film title, and it was it would be something just about the bleakness. Like, I mean, more and more, I find myself going down weirder rabbit holes with music, and now apparently with films, where I'm sort of delving into sort of avant-garde stuff. Just it seems to be itching some kind of scratch that I don't have. Like, I think it was on like one of those sort of top 10 YouTube lists of like the weirdest, darkest films, and just trawled through as many of them as possible, and it just. There's some sort of weird itch that it scratches from making, especially the ambient kind of stuff, because very much like the soundtracks to those films, they're not Hans Zimmer kind of things. They're just the odd, scary-ass sound and a bit of moody kind of atmospheres that come in here and there, and that, I don't know what it is about the visuals and everything that kind of ties that in. But yeah, it's only recently, I think on Avoid and Solitude, it wasn't as much. I can't remember what inspired that. I think, funny enough, you should mention, I think that was a more Ruins of Beverast kind of, I don't know, very indirectly, but it was, hearing that kind of tribalness of Exuvia, that was, because that was one of the first things I wrote for Crimson Throne, I believe. And Tom showed me Exuvia a while ago, and I was just blown away. And there was a tribal bit, I can't remember in what song, and that kind of inspired that bit. And yeah, I think we wanted like a tribal intro, just again to do like a build-up thing. So I put it in a different time signature, just to kind of break me out of the usual mold of how I would usually go about writing something like that. And then put like a weird harmonized guitar line or that kind of thing. But again, more so now, I think the film and other media thing, like. I find myself trawling through kind of weird photography pages and kind of oddly taken landscape photos and that kind of thing, and that kind of, again, it just triggers some sort of vibe that's just weird and moody. Yeah.
So what sort of stuff have you been watching?
There was a super dark film called Possum.
I've heard of it. It's yet to watch it.
Horrifically dark. It's a super slow burner, and the ending is harrowing. But it's just one of those that there's something about the vibe that keeps you going. Yeah, and it's something like really odd. Christ, what else? There was another horror film that I've done twice in the last couple of days. The House That Jack Built.
Oh yeah.
Which was nasty. Not necessarily more avant-garde, just sort of a bit kind of in the like unknown horror kind of thing. An old black and white one called Begotten that was particularly weird. I didn't get through all of it because it's hard. It's a very hard viewing.
Yeah.
But it's one of those where you don't quite know what you're looking at, but it's sort of itching some sort of scratch. It's a bit weird, and you don't really quite know what to do with yourself when you're watching it. But
I thought when you started saying the name, I thought you were about to talk about a Korean movie that I saw called Bedeviled.
Oh right, yeah.
I would.
I've been meaning to watch that. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I can highly recommend it, mate. I would probably put that. I'd stack that pretty highly up as one of the most horrific things I've ever seen in my life.
Let's give it a go.
The thing with Korean movies that I like is the stories are incredibly deep and intricate. You know, whilst at the same time they have a very, very different view or very different level of sensitivity towards violence that anything that I've seen out of Hollywood would have. Bedeviled is a great example. I mean, there's a scene where a woman hacks a guy's head off with a fucking one of those sickles that you and when I say hack, it's not like a Hollywood like a clean slice and there it goes. I mean, she literally like has to give it some fucking elbow grease.
Oh man.
It's brutal, and there's a real like a weight of emotion behind it when it happens. And I'm trying to think others that I can recommend as well if you haven't seen them. It's a Japanese-Indonesian collaboration called Killers.
Oh, right.
It's about this. The story is basically about this serial killer who uploads videos onto some illicit video sharing site, and then a vigilante who does the same. Yeah. These two guys start communicating, and then eventually it turns out that the serial killer is hunting down the vigilante. But it is fucked up. I mean, it's one of the most fucking hardcore things I've ever seen. The opening of the film, and this is one of the things I really love about any sort of Eastern cinema. They use cameras and they use visuals in a very different way as well. The opening scene of the film, or one of the opening scenes of the film, has this woman with a plastic bag over her head, but you see it from the perspective that she's seeing.
Oh, wow.
So you all you hear is her breathing into the bag, and you see the bag kind of hazing up. And then you see this guy with a mask in the back of the room with a hammer, and then he runs to her and he starts whacking. But it's like she's wearing a GoPro, and you can see the hammer coming at the screen all the time. It is, like I said, it's fucking horrible.
Harrowing.
I mean, there's some stuff that about it that's pretty funny. It's not you're not gonna sit the family down. Gather around, kids. Korean movie time. But House of Jack Built I've not seen yet. I know Mike Hill from Tombs on his podcast, he did a really interesting analysis of it, and it sounded like something I wanted to see. But as much as I am impervious to gore generally, and I don't really care so much about. I'm a meat eater, so I'm a hypocrite by saying this. I also don't want to see animals getting killed. I know he kills a duck or something in the movie.
I can't remember. Yeah, I think so.
The idea of that put me off entirely. It's like Cannibal Holocaust. I've never watched it because I don't want to see them killing turtles and shit.
It was
like that.
I mean, it took a couple of like I think the first time I watched it, I was like, it felt a bit too arty, really. Like it has, but then I think on second watch I kind of started reading into it more, because I mean I have this horrible tendency to not actually watch films fully. I can't sit still. I'm always doing something else. So I made a point like, right, no, let's just actually watch it and see what, rather than sort of dip in and out, and actually see what it's trying to say. And it took a couple of guys, but it's not bad.
Yeah, the thing I've been more kind of sidetracked by over the last couple of months has been, and to be fair, I've been sidetracked by it for many years, but I've especially delved deeply into it in the last couple of months is war documentaries.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know whether you're a fan of it or not, but there's a series called Apocalypse, and there's like Apocalypse World War I, Apocalypse World War II, Apocalypse Hitler, and Apocalypse Stalin. Apocalypse World War I and Apocalypse Stalin are two of the best documentaries I've ever seen in my entire life. They're about Apocalypse Stalin's about 6 hours, and Apocalypse World War One I think is a good seven to 8 hours, but it's fucking mind blowing.
That's again weirdly enough, that's one thing over the last I got into it a couple of months ago. I sort of dipped out of it a few weeks back, but there was I found this random history podcast that kind of delved into kind of random chunks of history, and it went into the siege of Leningrad. And from then on in, sort of got hooked on the Eastern Front, and sort of how that kind of whole part of the war played out. And I can't remember the name of the channel, but there's this guy on YouTube that does these crazy in-depth sort of video series on the whole Eastern Front, and he's got like a 5-series thing on Stalingrad, and it's crazy in depth, like into each army that went in. Is it Battlefield by any chance? I can't remember. It's a British guy.
Yeah.
It could be him.
It might be Battlefield, because Battlefield has when you say depth, I mean they literally tell you like the Germans had these tanks using blah blah blah, and they show the map, and it's like the English had
that's the one.
These planes that had Rolls-Royce engines or whatever the case may be. They have if you're interested in the Eastern Front, they have the Battle for Crimea is like season 6 of what he did. Dude, that is some fucking seriously grim shit.
I've not delved too far deep in it. I sort of got hooked on Leningrad, so I didn't realise that. Like again, the amount of suffering that just went in. I mean, it's a world war and it's a siege, but it's like just the sheer depth of how long it lasted, and it just mind blowing.
The one thing about the siege of Leningrad that I was just gobsmacked by is I can't remember what the documentary was called. I think this might be on Apocalypse World War II. They talked to this Russian lady, and she was in Leningrad during the siege, and she said there was one point where the Germans had surrounded the city entirely, and there was a German commander that stepped forward with a bullhorn, and he literally shouted at the city, either you come out and get shot or you get starved to death. There's no I think he said like either way you're going to die.
Yeah. Just can't.
Dude. There's
this one, because like I was saying about that podcast that kind of got me hooked on it. It was a podcast called the Siege of Seeds. And it was about, I forget the full story, I'm going to butcher it, but it was an old scientist that had amassed one of the world's largest collection of seeds, and it was stored in Leningrad. And because of its sort of importance at the time, even though they were starving and completely run out of food, no hope, they had these hundreds of thousands, millions of seeds of new fruits, vegetables, all sorts that they didn't grow because they knew of the scientific value. So they would all do whatever they could to protect that collection while starving to death outside of it.
Jesus.
And they said that the people one of the head guys of it was found dead when it was all cleared up with a bag of peanuts in his hand. He's like, and he's starved to death, surrounded by food. But now that collection of seeds was used. I think it was, again, don't quote me. I think it was one of the biggest vegetable farms or something in Russia. It's worth $400 million today because of that. Because of they saved that collection.
Yeah.
So it's things like that. Like you just can't imagine. Like you've got your own people trying to break down the doors of this seed storage. It's like, what are you doing? You've got tons of food in it, and they just wouldn't give it up.
Yeah. Somewhat related. Did you watch the Chernobyl miniseries?
Yes, absolutely loved it. About six times through. Yeah.
Oh my God, dude! I mean, I went down the rabbit hole on Chernobyl one Christmas, and I spent probably most of the Christmas break. I started with documentaries about North Korea, and after about 3-4 days of that, I was like, all right, let's move on to Chernobyl. And it started with, I wanted to see if I could find actual footage of the explosion happening, and then it's just kind of one thing leads to the other. But it was amazing to see that show. But the thing that I just it blows my mind every single time is how how willing those people were to pick up a spade and to run and go and pick up debris, and they knew it within a matter of 30 seconds they were going to have radioactive poisoning and they were going to die.
Well, it's like the people that went down to the tanks to release the valves. Like, you're going into radioactive water completely blind. You know you're not going to come out of that well. And just all the firefighters or the helicopter pilots, that kind of thing. Like,
all of which is great fodder for black metal lyrics, because one of the things that I read Tom saying, and I was keen to get your comments on this, but there was an interview with Cult Nation, I think, where Tom was saying, as far as the lyrics around Avoid and Solitude, I think he described them, and I may be butchering the quote here, but it says it deals with grievous misgivings of our species and the lessons we can learn from them. I mean, I don't know whether is it Tom that writes all of the lyrics, or kind of do you have a view on what he meant by that?
So Tom is the sort of conceptual brain behind Crimson Throne as far as its message and its kind of whole delivery lyrically and all that kind of thing. I think that was kind of the main thing, whereas the EP, the demo, focused more on just the fact that human depravity and human suffering just seems to know no bounds. And then Avoid Solitude is kind of similar to that, but over different periods and different kind of areas of time. Again, I'm not quite sure about the detail of either, but I know there was songs that went into the Irish famine. Echo Calls has a very direct meaning as well. I mean, they all do fundamentally, but I think everything we say will probably be around something along those lines to varying degrees. But yeah, it sort of depends. It tries to explore it in different cultures across different times, basically. But yeah, that's a pretty strong quote from him, really.
I was about to say, so in other words, what you're saying is it's not at all about Satan.
No, I don't think we ever mention anything to do with Satan. Yeah, I think we sort of are very much aware of the evils around us more than sort of any kind of spiritual thing. It's not really an area that has ever been of consideration for us, really, to be honest. I think it's more like, I think we're more sort of into talking about the horrors that we can see and the horrors that are sort of we're faced with and have been faced with over history.
Yeah, I find that still to this day to be a very interesting progression that modern modern black metal has made, where it used to be you're probably running the risk of a nearly 9-stone man trying to kick your ass if you sang about anything other than Satan.
Yeah,
and in kind of this modern era, I think there's been a level of kind of social awakening, but just for me, like an added intelligence to black metal that wasn't there before. Like even if you read Mugwa's lyrics on their last album, they write their lyrics in quite an abstract way, but at the same time it's quite pointed and quite angry, and it's certainly there's nothing religious about it. You have you guys. I'm trying to think of other examples. None immediately spring to mind, but there's definitely I don't know whether it's because black metal whether the original people that listened to it maybe were, more studious or more academic, smarter, whatever the case may be. But it feels like the next generations after, the Norway explosion and whatnot, it feels like there's definitely the artistry and the IQ of it has raised up exponentially.
Yeah, it probably sort of coincides with its sonic evolution as well. It's rather gone from sort of just primitive people in a basement playing chords to well thought out, properly composed kind of tracks and albums that flow really well. And that it's one of those things. I think it comes down to its ability to be able to express really well. Like there's never, it's one of those sort of paradoxes where whilst black metal sounds fairly similar, there's you can tell each band apart.
Yeah.
Because of the level of kind of correct freedom that you have, that you've got bands like Wolves in the Throne Room, all the way down to the most primitive, raw Black Celice kind of stuff that you can possibly get. That's all under the bracket.
Yeah.
So I think it just evolves with that, is that you can talk about, the cosmos, and then you can talk about the forest. It's kind of I can't remember who I heard. I think it was on some sort of documentary somewhere, where it was like, it is one of the most expressive forms of music you can get. And I never used to think so. So I thought, well, it's just angry dudes sliding chords about. But it's like, when you really look into the guts of it, like you said, there's some really kind of philosophical discussions going on. You got, like, we're good friends with Underdark, who have got their platform in a similar way to Dawn Raid, and a similar way to Ruins of Beverust, to, there's a million different ways you can express it. It all comes under the banner. And I think that's the thing that's now seems more allowed than it ever was in a genre that was kind of built on the back of elitism, and you have to abide by a lot of certain rules. It's branched out into this thing that no one's got any control over anymore, and you can just do whatever you want with. Yeah.
And I might be completely wrong about this, but I do feel like part of what kind of broke the mold and probably, I think, drove a lot more of that freedom, I think, were people like Gol, who kind of came out and one is openly gay, doesn't give a fuck what anybody thinks.
Yeah.
Has always said, black metal, aside from being about Satan, is also, about freedom. And I think that has been adopted as philosophy by a lot of modern musicians.
Yeah,
and his last record, it was fucking spectacular.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a black metal scream to be heard on the album, but if I had to, point to a record that to me really defines black metal, that record is just, it's quintessential black metal.
Yeah, and again, that just more so proves the point that it's like, you can do whatever the fuck you want and call it black metal, as long as it's in that delivery. It's just in. It was like, even in the UK, you got bands like Voices and Us and Winterfilleth, and like, all massively different for what they are, but all have something perfectly valid and do it really well, because it's just comes under that banner. And like, I think that's the one thing you hear about, how a lot of black metal fans are super elitist and super sort of, it has to be this way, it has to be a fixed set of rules. But I really haven't come across anyone in the scene that's actually like that.
No.
They are all fairly broad-minded, and like, we've played with some super diverse kind of bands, and you don't get anyone that's like, I'm not watching them because they're not this, or I'm not listening, that I'm not buying that because they're not this. It's like, no, they're just going to give it a go, because it's just someone still flying the flag, but in their own way.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think, I think that elitism. I mean, from my experience, when I was writing, and being on forums and stuff for the websites that I was writing for, I think it was definitely there in the the early 2000s. But I haven't seen a trace of it for at least the last decade. And if I think of the audience that listens to this show, the vast majority of what of who I talk to and what I talk about is related to black metal. Generally speaking, I feel like everybody that's gravitated towards the shows is extremely open-minded. They're very much kind of free thinkers, and they are very they're very kind of live and let live for a music genre that's very often associated with the annihilation of the human race. It's you have a remarkably open-minded bunch of people that are actually into it. And
very much.
So you think what you think, and and I think that's more important than ever, because if we get back to the discussion around war, my real fear at the moment when I look at the world, and I don't want to get too deep, but my real fear when I look at the world at the moment is we are very fast approaching the point where groups of people cannot coexist any longer. And when that happens, it's no longer us and them, it's us or them, and that's not a place anybody wants to be in. I think I think the world has been done a grave disservice by the fact that, frankly speaking, all kids in school should be mandatory viewing to watch the Apocalypse series or to watch World War II in color or something like that, because people need to understand the consequences of that kind of thinking. The guys that fucked off to the First World War thought they were going to be back by Christmas. And, next thing you know, it's 2 years in the trenches, and 65 million people dead.
Yeah.
There was a book written in 1914. I believe it was 1914, where the writer argued very passionately and, according to many, very persuasively, that there would never be a great war ever again. And less than half a decade later, there's over 180 million people have been dead or have been killed. So I think another thing that people miss is they think that we will never see catastrophe and bloodshed on a scale like that ever again. But there's a whole world going on that most people don't pay any attention to, and it all kind of catches up to you before you realize it. If people have been paying attention to the news, Australia have increased their defense budget. Japan have just announced the biggest defense spend that they've done since the Second World War. China normally are very quick to talk about their financial aims for the next 5 years or however they normally reported. They've not done any of that. The only thing that they've made sure everybody knows is that their defense spending is going up by 6.6%. You can see there's tensions building up.
Yeah, it's just a world rife with hostility in already a difficult enough time where it's we should be doing everything to pull together. It's like you said, it's sort of us or them mentality generally.
Exactly, and if people sat down and they spoke to each other one to one, I can guarantee you 99.9% of people would realize I could probably find something in common with my fellow man, no matter how different we are. You get stuck. I always think about it this way: you get stuck in a lift with somebody for 24 hours. Eventually, you're going to find something to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to try and find some sort of middle ground somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. If Predator was to come down to Earth, we'll very quickly figure out a way to put our differences aside.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you. You mentioned earlier about that kind of creative outlet and that expression, and you guys weren't exactly touring 365 days a year, but you were pretty active, and I know you were in a bunch of other bands. First and foremost, how do you feel about some of the stuff that has been, that's starting to become more prevalent now, like these quarantine gigs? And obviously, we mentioned Voices. By the time I post this, they will have done their streaming show at the Black Heart, and there's a bunch of things like that going on, which I personally think is very interesting. But as a musician, how do you feel about that?
I've been involved in a couple of stream things now, like pre-recorded kind of premieres more than shows, but it's something that we wouldn't have done had it not been for the lockdown. I love that people are being more productive rather than just sitting and doing nothing, because that's essentially what we've been reduced to. Streaming and doing pre-recorded sets and all that kind of thing, and releasing old live footage or unearthing old songs, that kind of thing is the best way that bands can stay active and on radars. That is their only means possible. I struggle to get excited for live stream stuff unless it is something like an actual show. But even then, it's just not got the same kind of thing for me. But I think hats off to any band that's actually still trying to stay alive, us included. It's like, especially I'm working with a band from Germany who's in the middle of their album release now. And it's the worst time to put an album out in many ways. Like in a lot of ways, it's brilliant because everyone's going to be able to listen to it.
Yeah.
But in many ways, you're going to be sat on your ass doing nothing on it. And so the vast majority of the potential income or potential spread that you're going to give it has been taken away. And it can potentially kind of ruin like a whole release process and a whole few years of working up to that. But no, I think for anyone that's still doing this, keep going as long as possible. I know that we're going to do what we can to keep keep somewhat active. I know that we've got. I mean, I'm always working on stuff, and we've been using the downtime to write and kind of get our arse in gear for when we can start moving forward again. But no, I think the streams personally are all a great thing, and they're all absolutely phenomenal. I just struggle to get excited about a lot of them just because it's not what it was. It's not show, but it is. But yeah, it's just my personal thing. I'm more in connection with seeing it in front of me physically, and that sort of has such an impact where it's anything less than that is just not quite hitting spot. But I'm all for it though. Definitely all for it.
I agree with you. I'm all for it. Me personally, I need the thud of the bass in my feet. I need that energy. And it was always I've bitched about this on the show so many times, but I do think in the last couple of years, at least my experience of the London music scene, some of that magic has gone away, in part because there's not as much money anymore. So there's no road crews, and so therefore bands are on stage doing their own sound checks and stuff like that. I would ideally not want any of that. I love that old vibe of, you see the guys on stage and they used to have their torches and they flick to the guy on the soundboard or at the sound desk, right? We're ready to go. And then the band comes up and it's like, crowd goes fucking nuts. I mean, there's an excitement to that I would happily pay £100 a ticket to be able to experience that the way that I used to.
Yeah. I work as crew for festivals, so it's being a part of it is as exciting, like just than actually seeing it, because you sort of there's this sort of tension of actually doing it, but it helps. Like, I know the sort of whole mantra of being on the crew is you're just there to make the band's life easier, which in turn will make them play better. Like, it's dead simple. Because, I mean, I know from touring where you've got 10-minute changeover from a left-handed drummer to a right-handed drummer with a full cab strip. It's like, to do all that, to do a massive shift on manual labour, to then think, actually, not only have I got to play, but I've got to play well enough to convince people. From an artist perspective, it's the worst thing. But you earn your stripes in touring that way. You get better when you do rise up the ranks and, can bring crew out and all that kind of thing. Even something as simple as like having a driver for a tour. Like, obviously most young bands will be driving themselves in a hired van or their own van or split between cars or however you want to do it. Having a driver in a van takes so much weight off for such a small thing. And then the band can focus on doing what they actually want to do rather than focusing on the logistics of doing it. Yeah.
What festivals did you work by, or have you worked recently by?
I am on the Sophie stage at Bloodstock. I'm a backline tech at Bloodstock, and then I stage manage a festival in Guildford called Radar that has preliminarily been moved to October this year. It was supposed to be in August, but they're not holding out a huge amount of hope for that. It's stressful, but it's a lot of fun. It's especially stage management. Stage management is fairly stressful because you've got people from all over the world demanding things and running crew, keeping an eye on their brakes, making sure the gear's working, making sure your other crew's happy, and it's good fun, but it's hard work.
I can also imagine that as the crowd gets drunker, they get a lot more restless when it comes to wanting the band on. I always thought to myself, like, the worst job, aside from opening for them, the worst job must be being being part of the Slayer road crew. Yeah. If you are 5 minutes over time, it's like, whoa, fuck you, bottles flying and all sorts of shit. But it also now makes sense, mate, as to why you work out.
If you don't, then lifting cabs is not the easiest thing ever.
Got to have them muscles to lift those cabs.
Pretty much, yeah. We've had some pretty sort of strenuous, tough time. I mean, most of the crew backstage at Bloodstock, at least, are fairly big dudes, and it's no there's no secret. It does help, but no, I had some fairly sort of strenuous load-ins and load-offs of big, heavy equipment, and lots of it. Like the Watain set was one that springs to mind. All of Batushka's rig was pretty crazy. I
was about to say, mate, I think if you're part of the Bloodstock crew, you have no choice but to be big, because if you're not, then Väki would probably fuck you up as well.
Basically, yeah. All the owners just come around and do it for you. It's like, okay, yeah.
It's just like, step aside, Junior, I'll show you how it's done.
The most jacked festival running team you'll ever see. Yeah.
Massively. I mean, have you seen her husband? He's fucking huge.
Crazy, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they sort of come around and visit the stages every now and then. It's always a case of like, do you want to jump in here quick and help out? Like, you could definitely do with a back like that kicking around.
Yeah. As we're on the topic of festivals, you and Tom have both been pretty outspoken supporters, and rightfully so, for this Let the Music Play campaign. Mm-hmm. For anybody listening in the States or anywhere outside of the UK, can you just talk a little bit about what it is and how people can support that and get involved?
I think just literally share any of the posts. I mean, it's just about generally spreading awareness of what of the potential strain that the industry is under. I think thankfully with that 1.57 billion that was announced the other day, considering how our government's handled this coronavirus, in my opinion, that's one of the better things they've done. And I'm hoping that gets funneled to the right places. But it's essentially just sharing the word about the potential damage that can come out of all this because of the industry literally just being put into a complete shutdown, and it potentially not coming out of it fully until next year. Like, really. I think it's anywhere you see anything like that. Any of the let the music play posts, just share it far and wide, tag people, do whatever you can do, because it's only going to help if the word is spread. Like I said, the government's move already should hopefully help, as long as it gets funneled into the right places. I did read through, and it said Boris himself did say from the sort of small underground venues to the West End, they hope to cover things. Which I
imagine you would have taken to the plate and said, we're going to be giving a significant amount of money, but the one genre of music that we really want to exclude from this is metal, black metal in particular.
That's the one thing I was sort of hoping that, because, I mean, obviously the Tory government is not necessarily as connected to the weird underground
the
extreme scene as we would like them to be, with venues closing left, right, centre, in peacetime, as it were. It was already in a pretty dire state anyway. Like I said, I'm just hoping it doesn't all just end up in the West End, which, I mean, obviously is massively important, but it doesn't all just go to the big money earners, as it were, and it does actually get funneled down into grassroots and these small little niche communities that just keep people going. I think as long as it does, some of it does end up in its right, and that's what I mean. It doesn't even really need that much, because it's all fairly low budget DIY as it is. Like, we're not going to need a billion to fund small little venues here and there. It's just enough to kind of keep us ticking over until shows can get back to at least 3/4 capacity. Because the whole socially distanced show thing, I've got a fear that it's just not going to work. No.
But then at the same time, how pissed off were you seeing the photos and the video that came out on Saturday? So when they, again, for anybody that is outside of the UK that's listening to this, over a year we raised the UK government raised the lockdown restrictions pretty exponentially, and a lot of the restaurants and bars and stuff could reopen. And in London in particular, they treated it like it was fucking New Year's Eve. So everybody's like, we're social distancing, nose to nose.
Yeah.
So question is, as a musician, knowing that the venues are shut, how pissed off were you seeing those videos and seeing how rammed those bars were? Because, I mean, it was worse than a fucking average Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had that many people show up to a Crimson Throne show. You know what I mean? Like this, it's that photo of Soho where I saw a caption. It's like, oh, it's a good thing there's a band not playing here, or it would be dangerous.
Yeah.
So all those people can go out to bars and pubs, and I mean, there's the sort of BBC footage of them admitting it's like, yeah, no, we're not socialist at all, but it's fun. It's like, well, that's the whole problem here, people. Like, if we just, it goes beyond words. That, you know, you can get somewhere like some little underground like venue that wouldn't hold any more than 10, 12 people is not on the cards for the rest of the year. But you can go down to Soho and not walk through the street without bumping into someone.
Yeah.
On a Friday night. But I mean, it's just a reflection of the level of hypocrisy that's been dealt out during the whole thing. The fact that you couldn't go around to see your mum, but you could arrange a house viewing. Yeah.
Well, mate, so you still can't. You're still not allowed to hug relatives. No, it's on the it's on the government website. You can go out and get smashed. You're not allowed to hug a relative. Like,
that. There was that one the kind of whole rule where it was. You know, you could. They say we're trying to kickstart the housing industry and all that kind of thing. Like, so I can arrange a house viewing, can't see my mum. What if I put my house on the market and my mum comes around to look at it? Well, what about then? Like, is that all right? Or like, I can't go and see a friend, but it just, it couldn't. I mean, it could have been dealt with worse, but at this point, it was struggling for it to have been dealt with any worse.
Yeah,
but. Yeah.
When it comes to the idea of kind of socially distancing shows and you know, I guess having an interim measure of some sort in place so that this thing can get started again before next year. Mm-hmm. If you were King Dan, what would your decree be? You know, how would you propose dealing with that?
I mean, I don't know, because it's the kind of catch-22 is everyone wants to get back to shows as fast as possible, and everyone wants to get back to touring as fast as possible. I mean, I've got friends that have been booked for tours for October, but you get that paradox of, well, if you run a socially distant show, it means you've got to run it at least half capacity, if not less. Then the venue can't afford that because there's just not enough heads coming through the door. The band will have to go out for less because they're playing to less people. There's less money involved in general. They have to start dipping in to their own pockets to get a tour. It's just, but then do you wait until potentially January, February, March of next year, by which time the industry could have completely shut down? Mm. So, I mean, I probably wouldn't want to start reopening shows until it was kind of enough that the industry could not necessarily support itself, but certain venues can sort of be realistic about staying alive throughout it. Because if you're getting a 200 cap venue, we can only have 20 people in. Everyone's losing there.
Yeah.
Whereas, like I was saying, you don't want to have to wait another 6 months, 6, 7, 8, 9 months before you can open doors again.
Yeah.
So it's a hard one. As long as it's finding that balance point between it being safe to do so and reasonable for people to put the amount of effort in that is required for touring and put the amount of money in that is required. And so it's, I don't know. I mean, what are we now? July. It's, like I said, I sort of mentally have written the rest of the year off.
Which I think, to be fair, is as much as we may or may not agree with it, I think is probably wise.
I think it's just, I'd love for it to be back in October. October seems to have seen this boom, not sort of mini with the boom, with certain bands wanting to like starting to book shows again and all that kind of thing. And they may be able to be possible, like to be doable under social distancing, but I know that some countries aren't even taking bookings yet. Yeah. So they're just saying touring's just not happening here no matter what until we say you can book. So that's making rerouting tours even more of a minefield than it already is. I mean, Yeah, I mean, my first sort of offer or potential offer came in for February, and I think that's kind of where maybe it could be sensible to start considering.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I mean, my worry with this is that, and I've said all along to anybody that I've spoken to this about, I listened to a number of really interesting conversations with epidemiologists, and the consensus from most of them, and this was, not CNN epidemiologists, this was actual people that don't get fucking spoon-fed an agenda beforehand.
Yeah.
The one guy was saying, and he's been proven absolutely correct. He says there is no second wave until there's a vaccine. There is a disease. There's regulation to try and slow the spread of the disease, and that's it. And when you when you ease the regulation, the disease is going to start spreading more. And if you if you increase the regulation, the disease gets again the spread of the disease gets slowed down. And that's exactly what's happened. They opened up in Texas. Shock horror. Yeah. There's a spike in infection. You could argue the merits of the protest, until you blew in the face. There's a massive spike in infections in California. Why? Because hundreds of thousands of people are in each other's face screaming. And the same thing is going to happen in London. So my worry is until there's a vaccine, this is not going to go away. So then you go to the question, okay, do you roll the dice with the actual mortality rate of the disease? And from what I've seen right now, the mortality rate of the disease continues to be lower than any of the expectations initially. I think the last thing that I read was it's 0.4%, and that really the only people that are where there is an exponential gap between between that kind of 0.4%, that low percentage rate, and higher numbers of people passing away is people that are, either have underlying health conditions, are older than 70 years, are obese, have a history of diabetes. And then the other thing that I read was people that have an acute deficiency in vitamin D, because vitamin D props up your immune system.
Yeah.
So that leads me to believe
thoroughly avoided most socials and most things just because it's
I do that anyway.
Becoming too much.
Yeah. No, it's the thing for me. Nothing changed in the lockdown aside from the fact that I had to take a pay cut. But beyond that, I frankly speaking, I still saw the same friend. I saw my friends. I saw my daughter, and nothing else about my life changed. I've almost always worked from home all the time anyway. Yeah, I mostly don't like society, so I don't. I choose not to spend a huge amount of time. The only thing that sucks is no gym. But at least I know I won't be the only flabby guts when. I'm
fully down the rabbit hole with that now. I'm monitoring it, but it's generally. It's generally not a.
Wait until that first step on the scale, mate. Mine was a couple of weeks ago, and I couldn't believe what I saw. It was fucking horrible.
I'm avoiding it. I'm terrified of it, man.
We've gone way over time, and I know you're a busy man, mate. But I want to wrap up with one last question, and it's the obvious one: what's happening with new music for Crimson Throne? I want to know the exact date when the new album's coming out, what it's going to sound like, what the cover is going to look like. And also, at which point in the liner notes I get thanked for my support, my overwhelming support.
You will be thanked, without a doubt. You will be thanked. Like I said, at the minute we sort of had our relative phone calls the other day about sort of trying to start the ball rolling on the process. I think we've sort of set a date that myself and Angie are going to kind of stop our individual output, because I think we're probably sat on about 16 or 17 demos at the minute, which are sort of our respective output. And then we'll sort of get together now that we kind of can, under certain circumstances, listen to everything, pretty much just have the chat about where we want to go and about sort of what we want to sound like, how we want to move forward. Start working on songs a bit more collaboratively. Because that's, like I said, there's certain things that Andrew's much better at and he's more facilitated to do, and there's certain things that I've got more of an ear for and that kind of thing. Start focusing on sort of context and lyrically, because one thing we do is try and replicate sonic elements to the lyrics. So if it's about a certain area, we'll try and incorporate different sonic elements of that kind of thing. And yeah, we haven't really set much as far as dates is concerned. I think, again, like, we wanted to wait until we could potentially plan tours and at least shows before we can start looking at releasing. Same with recording, really. I think the one thing, like I said, the one thing that we didn't have with Avoid and Solitude now is time. So we're just going to spend as much time as possible being sort of proactive and productive as far as getting the most complete, cohesive album together that we can, and then with a bit of luck, in a year, 18 months from now, we can actually have something to present where it's like, right, this is something that is a continuation of where we're at, but an accurate reflection of who we are as well. So we draw on such a wide influence that it'd be silly to just write all that off.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, as far as date's concerned, not a clue, but you will definitely end up in the notes, without a doubt.
I was only fucking around, mate, but
without a doubt.
I love what you guys do, as you know. I've been a fan of the band. As the second I discovered of Void and Solitude, I was hooked, and I am really, really looking forward to what you guys do next. And likewise, I massively appreciate you coming on. Like I said, long overdue, and we probably have so much more to talk about. We need to do a sequel at some point in the future.
Yeah, for sure, man. Without a doubt.
Awesome. All right, brother. Thank you very much.
Nice one. Cheers, mate. See you soon.
Bye-bye. You have just been listening to a track called Indignant Slumber by Crimson Throne off of their frankly spectacular debut record of Void and Solitude. That was put out, of course, by friends of Into the Necrosphere, Apocalyptic Witchcraft Records. And as I said at the top of the hour, if you have not yet heard that album, you absolutely owe it to yourself to spend ample amounts of time with it. And I really can't wait to hear what these guys do next. From my perspective, I think Crimson Throne absolutely set the benchmark for UK black metal. Yeah, what a great guy Dan was. Obviously, if you are watching this on YouTube, you would have noticed no video feed from his side. That was done at the behest of the band, and not everyone is all that keen on seeing themselves on camera. So from time to time, that happens. You should have no complaints because you got to stare at my handsome face for over an hour. On the topic of UK black metal, let us talk about Ante-Inferno, who, like I said, have come extremely highly recommended to me by a great many people. And I have to admit, which is going against type for the reviews that I do on the show, because I have said very many times that, I don't really want to critique bands too heavily or review things that I don't necessarily like. So hence why, if I'm very honest, I have steered clear of Ante-Inferno. When they first put out a single off this record, I must admit that I kind of failed to see what the hype was all about. Now that I've spent some more time with the album, and I've listened to it back to back, probably 5-6 times, I can certainly see why some people like this so much. And for me, the album is very much a tale of two halves. So early on in the record, it starts off with a really great intro that is filled with atmosphere and kind of really, I think, sets the tone for the album well. And then I feel like for the next 3 tracks, a lot of that potential is just squandered a little bit. The first proper song, Oath, in particular for me, is too long. I think the blast sequences are stretched out to a point where it's almost like it feels like they were blasting whilst kind of thinking of what can we do next year? I don't know. We'll just keep on blasting. So that, the song is good, but there's just nothing special or really memorable about it outside of the fact that, you remember it for being too long. The next 2 tracks after that, Passing and Return. And by the way, every single song on the album is a one-word title. Are kind of the same. They're shorter, but again, there's nothing about them that I find truly memorable. And then once the record kind of hits the halfway mark, it turns to an instrumental called Absence, and it really shifts gears pretty dramatically. And the next 2 tracks, the 2 tracks that close off the record, and in particular the last song, which is a track called Fragments, the band really, really come into their own, and those 2 songs are chock full of really, really great riffs, very memorable. There's a lot more variation, I feel, on those 2 songs than there are earlier on in the record. The band pivot from those, fast, angry, tremolo-pecked riffs through to, slower, doomier bits, and also bits that are a little bit more atmospheric. And just overall, I think the delivery of those 2 songs just hits home with me a lot more so than earlier on in the album. I don't know what the order was in which these songs were written. I don't know whether they recorded them kind of as they wrote them. But what I will say is, if Ante-Inferno's future it can be indicated with Worship and with Fragments, which is those 2 last songs, then I think the future is going to look particularly bright for them, or particularly evil. So I think I can understand why people like it. I don't think Fane will be appearing in my top 20 this year, but I think it's a very competent debut. I think there's a lot of potential here, and I'm going to play my favorite track off the album now. This is a song called Fragments. performance by probably one of the most hyped bands in the UK black metal scene right now, Ante-Inferno. Yeah, like I said, I like the album. I am curious to see what they do next, because I'm not entirely sold yet. From my perspective, the two bands, certainly from the new breed, that currently share the heavyweight title of biggest black metal badasses in the UK are Crimson Throne, unsurprisingly, and Abduction. And I'm not quite sure Ante-Inferno reached those peaks just yet. One country who is having, by all accounts, a fucking spectacular year as far as great new black metal is concerned, is Finland. No, you probably thought I was going to say Iceland, but I think we should just resign ourselves to the fact that Iceland operate on an entirely different level to pretty much every other country on the face of the earth. But yeah, I mean, Finland have been responsible for delivering to us Oranssi Pazuzu's latest masterpiece. And then I recently discovered a band on black metal promotion called Väki. They have been around since 2016. They feature 3 members from a band called Deathkin. They also have the bassist and guitarist from Seremoth. And I know that I will probably have to hand in my cult credentials, but I know neither of those bands. But I did notice on YouTube a couple of folks were commenting and acting like they were the biggest bands on the face of the earth. But regardless of that, Väki have put out a new record called Colleen Mon Omoxi on Redefining Darkness Records. And good goddamn, is this a fucking surprise? And I don't know why I'm so surprised, because, you know, Finland has a great tradition of good black metal anyway. But, you know, for a band who's kind of flown this far under the radar, to really only sort of come to my attention right at the time they're bringing out a record, I was just amazed by how crisp, how refined, how polished in a good way, not in a kind of Dimmu Borgir way, but just how staggeringly effective these guys sound. You know, for a debut record. This is pretty heavy, aggressive, riff-orientated black metal, with tons of variation, tons of maturity, loads of great melody, a vocalist that sounds absolutely unhinged. You know, and really, it's hard to fault it, and it's hard to it's hard to kind of get my head around how you know, such a young band could sound so well put together. I'm going to play a track now off of Colleen Mon Omoxi. You listen to it and you tell me what you think. But this for me has been a real surprise, and it's definitely getting the second half of 2020 kicked off in fine style. This is a song called Vaisto. was a track called Vaisto by Väki out of Finland. The album is available on Redefining Darkness Records, and it is the bee's knees sucking on the dog's bollocks. Go over to their Bandcamp. I'll post the link in the description to the podcast. But definitely check them out. Buy a CD, buy some tracks, buy some merchandise, and when you do, let them know that Into the Necrosphere sent you, because they should know who their allies are in this dark and dank and dangerous world. But yeah, fucking great band, and just an absolutely superb debut. Okay, let's talk about the latest in metal news. So we'll start with Septic Flesh present official live video clip. I watched this yesterday. I am a fairly big fan of Septic Flesh, and I have really been since the very early days. I remember getting Mystic Places of Dawn like back in probably 1995, 1996, and thinking that Sortires, the vocalist, was the most brutal man on the face of the earth. Obviously, this Septic Flesh Blu-ray, Symphonica XX, is based on the name, you can probably tell, the Septic Flesh answer to Metallica's S&M, so it's a symphonic experience. And from the track that they've released, I think it sounds really cool. I don't think it should surprise anybody that Septic Flesh would have wanted to have done something like this. I know for some folks it'll probably feel like it's a little over the top and maybe a little too polished and too nice. But I think that they've pulled it off based on the track that I've heard, with without sounding like they wimped out too badly. They don't sound as I think as commercially palatable as Dimmu Borgir or Satyricon did when they did it. And the one thing that you pick up pretty quickly, because knowing something about the guys in Septic Flesh, these guys have an academic knowledge of music that far surpasses any of the bands that I just mentioned, and I think it shows in what they're doing on this show. So given the fact that I'm a sound geek, I am quite looking forward to getting a hold of the Blu-ray version of this and giving my speakers and my setup here at home a little stretch. But no, I like this. I think it's very good. I'm actually surprised by how much I liked it. And kudos to Septic Flesh. Great live band, by the way. If you've not seen them yet, I saw them play at. I've seen them play twice. I saw them once playing with. I'm trying to think now who it was. It may have been Behemoth or Chrysian. And I've also seen them play once with at Incineration Fest last year in London. And both times they were top-notch. Mosaic, streaming track from upcoming album. They have, Mosaic have premiered Bittersweet Odor, which is the odor that leaves my body when it's steak night. They've the new track off their forthcoming studio album Harvest. It's out on July 24th via Eisenwald. And I listened to the track, and I must confess I didn't think much of it. And I had very high expectations, because Eisenwald are also the record label where Panzerfaust find home. So maybe my expectations were just a tad too high, but be that as it may, it's I don't know. I also don't think the name Mosaic sounds particularly grim or cult. Maybe that's just me, and I immediately think of mosaic tiling when I think of that. But yeah, it just doesn't do much to scare me. And the picture of the guy in his robe chucking wheat isn't particularly frightening either. I have to say, as much as there's a great many bands that I listen to that do this, we are getting to a point now with the robes and stuff and the hoods starting to get a bit lame. It's one thing when 2-3 bands do it and it looks cool. It's another thing when fucking every band is doing it. So Yeah, guys, I think it's time to think of something else. Venomous Concept drop new single Eliminate. Venomous Concept are a band that I really like. I loved their previous record, which was the first that they had with Kevin Sharp on. Even though I kind of felt like there's probably a bit of overlap in some of those songs because you've got Shane Embury and Kevin Sharp doing Venomous Concept together. Then you've also got them doing Lockup together. And they're kind of two different bands, but I don't know, just felt a little too close to each other for me. But be that as it may, Venomous Concept's last record, like I said, was cool. So far, everything that I've heard of this was good as well. The album is called Politics versus the Erection. And Shane Embury is going to be a busy guy because that comes out on the 28th of August on Season of Mist. And then they are also putting out the new Napalm Death in September via Century Media. So I'm sure he's going to be so fucking sick and tired of doing interviews that coming on to into the Necrosphere to have a regular chat will be slightly different for him and a refreshing change of pace. And by the way, I've not actually looked into getting him on, but I would love to have Shane on. I did interview him back when I'm trying to think what the fucking album was called. It was the Napalm Death record that had Jamie Jasta on. Smear Campaign. I interviewed him then, and actually, I remember very well. I was working for a recruitment company at the time, whose name I shan't repeat. Great company to work for, but I only had one slot open to be able to interview Shane. I had to book a meeting and go and sit in a meeting room in my suit and tie with my little dictaphone that I used to use at the time for interviews, and I interviewed him there. And I would have gotten into an awful lot of trouble had someone caught me, but anyway. Okay, Incantation premiere Fury's Manifesto video clip. You know, when I talk about death metal being boring, the first band I think about is, as an example of that, is Incantation. But that being said, I listened to a couple of, I listened to this Fury's Manifesto clip, and I was actually surprised. It didn't sound too bad. I mean, it still doesn't sound like something that I'm going to waste my time listening to. But if I was at if I were to visit a mate and they play that, I probably wouldn't feel too annoyed by it. I still do think, though, you know, there are good good death metal bands out there, but in terms of the number of great death metal releases coming out versus what you're getting in black metal right now, it's worlds apart. Let us move on. There's a whole bunch of bands whose names I cannot pronounce, which sometimes suggests that they may be pretty good, but I'm not going to bother talking about them. They get penalized for not sticking to the Queen's English. I think that there is pretty much nothing else really to discuss on Metal Storm. Let's give one more page a whirl. And I am correct. There is nothing to talk about on Metal Storm. So let's go over to Blabbermouth. And as you guys can see, I've been doing. We've moved on from the Google ads being about gaming PCs back to hi-fi shit. I'm going to be doing some upgrades to the system here pretty soon. Okay, Max Cavalera discusses tracks from Sepultura, Killer Be Killed, and Cavalera Conspiracy in latest Max Tracks episodes. I think that Killer Be Killed is probably one of the best things that Max was involved in after Sepultura. I would have really liked to have seen him carry on with Nailbomb, to be quite frank. I think Nailbomb doesn't get the recognition and love that they deserve. I still listen to Point Blank fairly regularly, and it actually has a place of prominence on my gym playlist as well. But like I have said many times, and you'll hear me wax lyrical about on next week's Rick Eaglestone episode, I would take Derek Green, Sepultura, any day of the week and twice on Sunday over everything that Max has done with Soulfly and Cavalera Conspiracy. there is a delta, as they say in the corporate world, between the IQs of the output of those individual bands. And with Killer Be Killed, I kind of felt like that played to his strengths a little bit more. But you also had, I think, Troy from Mastodon on there, and just other musicians who could balance things out a little bit. Rammstein announces 2021 North American tour. I have told my girlfriend that I don't give a fuck whether I have to pay £500 a ticket, but when these guys come and play in the UK again, I am going to every single show. I've probably not had the level of withdrawal that some folks have had about not being able to go to live shows, but I really would fucking kill to see Rammstein again. So I hope the goddamn Corona bull mash disappears from our existence very, very soon. David Ellefson on upcoming Megadeth album. It's gonna be a phenomenal record. Like David Ellefson, I'm getting a little tired of the fact that I see at least 2 articles a day pop up either on my Google News or on Blabbermouth or wherever else with him talking about how great the record is going to be. Zip it, finish recording the record and have us decide for ourselves, bearing in mind that from my perspective, you have yet to produce anything worth listening to since Rust in Peace. Anthrax discusses Public Enemy collaboration in episode 2 of Persistence of Time video series. I love Bring the Noise, but is it just me, or have Anthrax yet to stop congratulating themselves about how progressive they were to record a rap metal hybrid some 25, 30 years ago? I mean, like I said, great track. When they play it live, especially in the John Bush years, it used to level the fucking audience and shake whatever building they were in to its rafters. But there have been so many fucking thousands of videos and interviews, and it's always the same thing. Back when we were doing, or back when we decided to do it, no one had ever mixed rap and metal before. It's like I said, I can just see Scott Ian and Charlie Benante patting themselves on the back every time that they talk about it. Sebastian Bach slams Chris Jericho over lip-syncing allegations. Every clip on the internet is you miming to a tape. I think if we were to take a phrase out of wrestling lexicon, I think we're being worked on this one. It feels very much like a Chris Jericho orchestrated wrestling feud, and I would not be surprised if Sebastian Bach shows up on an AEW show at some point in the near future. Because if it's serious, then Sebastian Bach is even more of a fucking douchebag than I thought he was. I'm gonna read some of the comments here. It was pretty funny though. They're going backwards and forwards with Sebastian Bach saying that Chris Jericho mimes everything when he's on stage. And by the way, I don't like Fozzy, but I do love Chris Jericho as a wrestler. And I'm going to apologize in advance. Rick Eaglestone and I spent about 20 minutes of that interview you guys are going to see next week. Fortunately, right at the end, so you can skip past it if you don't like wrestling. But we were talking about wrestling and about how much or how fucking awesome Chris Jericho is. But yeah, Chris Jericho posted, I've seen the derogatory comments towards me from somebody I consider to be a friend. So with that in mind, I'll be happy to have a sing-off with Sebastian Bach. No effects, no tuning, no bullshit. Bass is a great singer, but I'm better. You've got my number, dude. Call me. Bach then shot back. Where is the derogatory comment? All I asked is to see one single clip of you singing live. Every clip on the internet is you miming to a tape. I will sing in your fucking face anytime. Wrestling is not rock and roll. I will show you fucking rock and roll. Yeah, man. That sounds to me like a work. What I would really like to see is an actual honest to goodness fist fight between Chris and Sebastian. I do not care for that man whatsoever. He's not quite on the level of Tommy Lee or Nikki Sixx, but he's a fucking douche all the same. Corey Taylor teases first music video for upcoming solo album. I think that's going to be about as exciting as my first prostate exam, which I am dreading having to go for, by the way. I'm 40 years old. I think you're supposed to start going for it from when you're 40 or when you're 50, but fuck, man. It's not something I'm down with. This picture that they post on Blabbermouth of Corey Taylor on the scene looks like he has some sort of wrestling belt that says CMFT. So I suppose he's heavyweight champion of the Corey motherfucking Taylor Wankstain League. That being said, though, as I said before, I don't like him. I think he's a fucking egotistical dickhead. But he can sing his ass off. And if you go onto YouTube and you look up covers that he did in that Camp Freddy band, when he does Ain't Talking About Love by Van Halen or Running with the Devil by Van Halen, fuck me. That is some seriously good shit. And it actually makes me think that that's the kind of stuff that he should have been doing. I think they should have booted Sammy Hagar out of Van Halen, and they should have had him open up for him be their singer. Udo Dirkschneider says, "Accept reunion is not possible." Udo on that photo looks like a guy who's shouting slogans at a white supremacist parade. I'm sure Udo is not of that is not about that life, but that picture looks very suspiciously like there's some guys waving Confederate flags and wearing Klan hoods behind him. Speaking of which, ex-Pantera bassist Rex Brown slams Trump over handling of coronavirus outbreak. This was hysterically funny. So, former bassist Rex Brown has slammed President Donald Trump over his handling of the coronavirus outbreak. He writes, "Now, if only we would have listened to these guidelines, 3 million of us wouldn't be sick," Rex tweeted on Monday, July 13th, to his 12,000 Twitter followers. 140,000 plus dead and counting. And to think we had to listen to an Oompa Loompa that only wants ratings, not precaution. Disgusting. So this is why I get so fucking pissed off at musicians talking about politics or turning things into political discourse when they clearly don't know. They haven't the first fucking clue about what they're talking about. First of all, there's plenty of fault to find in how the administration handled the coronavirus, but in this instance, he's comparing America's handling of it to New Zealand. New Zealand have 5 million people that are resident in the country, and America has 328 million people. So you cannot compare the infection rates in that country, in New Zealand, with America, because it's just completely disproportionate. It's ridiculous. Someone pointed this out to him, and then Rex added, "It's called leadership." So he also doesn't seem to understand that he lives in a country where leadership between the federal government and the states is a pretty frayed and interesting affair. And if you look at the death rate in America, the state that by far had the highest death rate was New York State, led by Andrew fucking moron Cuomo. And Andrew Cuomo, amongst other things, sent elderly COVID-19 patients back into care homes when he knew them to be infected, and he also knew that the virus disproportionately affects the elderly, especially the elderly with underlying health conditions. So how on earth is a decision like that the fault of the administration? And bear in mind, America have had 140,000 deaths of coronavirus, again, of which the vast majority have been folks aged older than 70. And the vast majority of those deaths have been in New York. New York is run by Andrew Cuomo, Democrat. New York City is headed up by Mayor Bill Communist fucking idiot de Blasio, who, when there was already widespread reports of the virus, encouraged people to go out into the streets and celebrate Chinese New Year. Again, I'm not sure how you lay that at the feet of the current administration. And I'm not being an apologist for the administration, but my point here is, if you're going to give an opinion about stuff like this, or if you're going to rant about things like this, at the very least, have your facts straight. But, we can't expect that of somebody like Rex Brown. And frankly, as I've said many times before, at the end of the day, I'm a free speech guy. And I think, within the realms of acceptability, so, you're not yelling all sorts of racist shit and, saying all sorts of homophobic or sexist things, you should be able to say pretty much what you want. So I'm going to say what I want, and that is that Rex Brown is a bassist of mild capability who should go down on his knees every single night and thank whichever god he prays to that he met the brothers Abbott, or most likely he would have been driving a truck. And I suspect that the reason why he's suddenly acting as in touch with his friends on the left as he's decided to do is because he hopes that the outrage mob don't clock onto the fact that for the better part of his entire career, the guy was waving the Confederate flag fucking well up high. What a fucking dickhead. We move on. If you guys can hear that, by the way, there's some screaming brat in the background. That's not my daughter. She doesn't sound like that either. But anywho, Metallica and San Francisco Symphony S&M 2 live album and video details revealed. I watched the All Within My Hands clip that they released off of this, and I have to say, more and more I'm starting to think that maybe this should have been Metallica's future. Maybe their next record should be an acoustic album, because the best thing that they've put out in 20 years has been a boot, or not even, I don't think it was a bootleg, I think it was kind of a benefit release where they played at the All Within My Hands, or they played at a benefit called All Within My Hands. Sorry, I'm sounding like a fucking imbecile stumbling over my words here. But I thought that was very good, and I think that they did a couple of tracks on there, including "Bleeding Me," which through acoustic guitar done in the style that they did it there, similar to what they're doing on this S&M 2 live album, I think sounds excellent. It sounds a damn sight better than their attempt at metal, which was hardwired to poo destruct. No, let's not even get into Death Magnetic or Saint Anger, but I think that's where they're at their most comfortable, is with this style of music, and I think maybe that's what they should focus on. They won't, of course, and I guess nor should they, because I am but one man, and my opinion doesn't count for all that much. And they have hundreds of thousands of millions of fans who would hate to see them not make the metal. But for my money, I think they're at their best when they do. When they tone things down and they slide comfortably into the those old gray man slippers of theirs. I also was thinking a little earlier today, actually, about something I've said before about taking any successful band's money away from them and keeping it until they finally retire. I think that with a band like Metallica, I think one of the biggest problems isn't just that they have money, and that level of comfort that they experience doesn't necessarily make for certainly the type of art that all of us are going to like. But I think also the more successful that you become, the more you start surrounding yourself with yes men and yes women, and people that are never going to have the stones to tell you, James, that riff fucking stinks, or Kerry, you have written essentially one song that is worth listening to for the last 3 Slayer albums. I think that's one of the big. I think that's one of the big problems with all of these bands. And I think the higher up the success totem pole that you go, I think the more that happens. And fortunately, it doesn't seem yet to have happened to the likes of Testament or Paradise Lost. Although the signs are ominous for Paradise Lost. That last record, again, I'll talk about it more next week, but it's good. The more I listen to it, though, the more the word underwhelmed comes to mind. It feels to me like there's a lot of very lazy shit going on that album. Yay, another post about Trump and the coronavirus response. This fucking Borry from Blabbermouth go scouring the music scene, looking for people to try and become or try and present themselves as political experts. The world right now, for me, is a bit like back when when Floyd Mayweather was boxing. And every time there'd be a Floyd Mayweather fight come up, some fucking moron would come to me at work and they'd go, "So, what are your predictions in the fight?" And I'd go, "Well, Floyd Mayweather is probably going to win." And I remember one in particular, the first time that Floyd boxed Manny Pacquiao, there was this fucking nitwit that I used to work with that came up to me and was like, "So, what do you think is going to happen?" And I said, "Well, I know what's going to happen. What do you think is going to happen?" "Well, Manny Pacquiao's got that overhand right." And I'm like, overhand right? I said, that's going to be pointless against a guy who's as defensively strong as Floyd Mayweather. I said, I can tell you right now the fight's going to go. It's going to be Floyd evading Manny Pacquiao for 12 rounds straight, and everybody's going to say afterwards, that was unbelievably boring. What a letdown. I hate boxing. I'm never watching it again. Lo and behold, that's what happened. But the point of it is, there's just certain things that for some reason makes people believe or turns people into experts for a day or a week or a month. And right now that seems to be politics. To a point, it seems to be the coronavirus as well. Everybody is suddenly a fucking epidemiologist. You sit on calls at work, or I listen to people talk in meetings, or I listen to people on the internet and stuff like that, or fucking moron Rob Flynn from Machine Crap. Going on about how they forecast how long the pandemic is going to last for. How the fuck do you know how long it's going to last for? Have you done any sort of research? Have you done anything other than read some drivel on some fucking CNN bullshit website, or heard something that a mate said to a mate? None of us know how long it's going to last. There was some good news on a vaccine the other week, but that's literally about as vague as me saying I bought a lottery ticket and I had I've got a good feeling. It's just I don't know. I know it flies in the face of what I said about everybody having having the right to opinion. I never wanted to come across like I'm so opinionated that I don't want to allow for other people to have their own views. I do. I get a little impassioned about shit. But it's just stop trying to lecture people about things that you know fucking nothing about. And if you are going to try and lecture somebody, at least show us the courtesy of attempting to educate yourself about it. This one, another one. Skid Row's Rachel Bolan on COVID-19 pandemic. This is a real thing, and it's freaking scary and needs to be taken seriously. I'll tell you what's freaking scary, that a man in 2020 can still have that fucking horrendous piercing that he has. If you're not watching this on YouTube, he still to this day wears that same stupid ring that's connected with a chain, or ring through his nose, I should say, sorry, that's connected with a chain to the ring in his ear. It looks fucking ridiculous. And that is pretty much where I'm going to end it. Napalm Death frontman on new album. We're heading into the noise rock territory. A couple of folks did a bit of a double take when they saw that, but question to them is, have you not been listening to the last couple of Napalm Death albums? They've been fairly squarely headed to that space for a while now, and I personally don't think they'll sound very much different to what they sounded on Apex Predator. I just think maybe there'll be a little bit more clean singing, a bit more melody, frankly, I think that's fucking great. That's part of why I love Napalm Death. And as I said, as much as I will differ from Barney politically, I think he's a fucking badass dude, and I love the band. All right, that is it for this week. Next week, I've got my daughter coming to visit me for the week. So I'm recording this a couple of days in advance. I'm going to edit the episode straight after this, and then I'm going to post it up on the internets, and you guys will still have a show right on time, as always. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode as much as I have enjoyed recording it. And as ever, I hugely appreciate everybody's support. I've thought at some point I should go down the roll call by name of fucking badass dudes who always send me messages about how much they like what the show was about, or they appreciated this recommendation of a band or whatever. But Scott Bamford, Craig Sansom, I think is his surname, without looking at my phone. You are two killer dudes, and I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I hope all of you guys enjoyed the episode. Spread the word, tell your friends and family, and stay safe and healthy. Tune in next week for my interview with Rick Eaglestone. Interview, really, it's a review and a celebration of all things that were fucking great and badass about music in 2020 so far. But in the meantime, from the mean streets of Surbiton on the outskirts of London, I am wishing all of you guys a fond motherfucking farewell.